I'm John Asplund. I am the healthcare reporter at Crain Chicago Business, and I've been doing that since 2019. Started off with our Health Pulse newsletter, and now I cover the entire large beat of healthcare. And I'm excited to hear everything the panelists have to say, as I'm sure you are as well. Let them introduce themselves.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Shana Kelley, president of Bioengineering at Biohub, which is a research institute focusing on biomedical research here in Chicago. I'm also a faculty member at Northwestern.
Ironic that I'm a technology guy. I can barely use this thing. Hi, I'm Ken. I'm a co-founder of a group called Health Equity Innovation Partners. And what we do is we sit at the intersection amongst technology and communities and those who provide healthcare to rural and underserved. Prior to that, I've been lucky enough to found, invest in, or operate 13 startups and been even luckier to exit most of them. Along the way, ran a couple family offices and had the pleasure of working with fund groups like JP Morgan for the healthcare conference and the White House.
Very cool. I'm Justin Brueck, System Vice President of Innovation and Research at Endeavor Health, so formerly North Shore University Health System on the North Shore of Chicago. Been with the organization about 15 years, and in that period of time have seen technology evolve, number one, but number two, also see how technology doesn't evolve as fast as we want it to. Or get adopted as fast as it should. So happy to provide some perspective on that today.
Great, fantastic. We don't have too much time, but we got a ton of questions, so I'll just jump right in. I think the first thing we do is kind of define what we mean by medical moonshots. When you think about medical moonshots, what are some of the things that truly differentiates a transformative breakthrough versus just incremental innovation? Shay, you want to start?
Okay, sure. I mean, the way that we think about this at Biohub and the way I think about it more broadly is that, I think with where we are in medicine, we don't need too many more incremental steps. I mean, we can do that. We can keep taking incremental steps. We can give patients a few more months of life here and there. But we really need to be aiming very high in terms of transforming the solutions that we can give to patients. And one thing that we are very focused on is trying to realize dramatic decreases in the burden of human disease across society. That's really kind of what we have our eye on. Because treating disease, you're only ever going to get so far. If somebody's already presented with an advanced chronic disease, it's hard to walk that back. But if you can prevent, you have the potential to really put a big dent in it. So that's kind of our moonshot and how we think about it and the work that we do. Again, it's always kind of high risk, high reward. How could we really move the needle, not necessarily kind of how to just tick along a little bit more.
And what do you think?
Our definition is always through the lens of equity, so healthcare for all. So our test is relatively simple, which is, does it change the denominator? And what I mean by that is, it's a given that if something is in a moonshot territory, that it is significantly better, that it provides something totally new for clinical. But our lens and our perspective is, it's transformative if it changes who gets care. So it expands that. And then it's incremental if it provides better care, but for the same population.
Yeah, I would just echo what's been stated, but from my standpoint in healthcare, being on the operation side of it, the moonshot is adoption. Like, it's truly saying, how do you take all the crazy, awesome technologies that people are bringing forward and actually get them beyond a pilot? And it seems simple, but I will tell you, you want to see a great idea die, go into healthcare sometimes, because honestly, it can just take so long to get things across the finish line. So for me, it seems simple, but the moonshot is getting it over the finish line and scaled.
Great, great. In terms of getting it over the finish line, what are some of the biggest gaps, barriers, validation, reimbursement? Where's the rub?
I honestly think a lot of it is health systems, and I think healthcare in general has this NIH mentality I joke about, which is not invented here. We don't do it. And I think that permeates a way that we approach all these technologies. We have a skepticism, I think, in healthcare about what's the incentive on the other side of the table, and kind of similar to the previous conversation, what is really the drive behind why someone wants to work with us? Is it a money play, or is it about equity? Is it a play for size and scale and reputation, or is it a play to actually help our clinicians at the front line? And so I think, honestly, that's one of the biggest issues is trust. The other one is, when we talk about AI in general, it's integration and implementation, because people develop these tools in silos, and they work really great in the academic lab. Now you bring that into a system that's not sterile and that has a lot of different things going on at any given moment with a lot of different players at the table, and pretty soon you realize that these technologies don't actually work in the real world. And so for me, trust and integration.
Do you mind if I jump in from the perspective of a startup? 100% agree with everything you just said, and every time you say a story, I just have personal pain and PTSD. So the other thing, though, is there's a misalignment of timeframes and incentives. Like, for example, a startup, we want to go in, we want to work with a hospital system, we want to go as quickly as possible. But rightfully so, healthcare systems, you know, it's what's that phrase in tech? Move fast and break things. You can't do that in healthcare because they're people, and so rightfully so, you've got committees and different iterations of X, Y, Z groups that really have to go through that, and oftentimes startups, especially the first or second revs, we're not planning for that, and that just does not end well.
Oh, I would just add, I'm one of those people that develops technologies in silos. I just want to make that disclaimer. We've done a bunch of technology platforms and startups, and I know all of the pain of the early stage everything. And I mean, what's happening right now that is particularly problematic with what we're talking about is just that the support, you know, or the capital behind early stage development is just gone, right? And it's either gone or really being skewed towards the AI side of things. And there is much less investment in hard tech biomedical innovation right now. And so I mean, Biohub, we're an AI-powered biology-focused institution. We do a lot with AI. I completely believe in the future of AI in biological research and in medicine. But it's not going to help us get things adopted, you know, in the way that's really, really hard in the healthcare system. Yep. Maybe there'll be a transformation that happens and that I don't know about yet, but I do think we're going to see that gap widening because of what's happening right now.
Great, great. I'd kind of like to pursue that line more, but talk to me a little bit about the emerging technologies like the AI-driven diagnostics or autonomous systems, and what's likely, and maybe you're saying it's not, but what's likely to deliver those step change, those moonshots out of AI?
Well, I do think that, you know, the thing that I think is very tangible right now in terms of what AI can do in my sphere is dramatically accelerate research and dramatically accelerate what we can learn and what we can discover. And we're already seeing this. You know, we just had a preprint go up a few days ago where we launched a campaign to discover new drivers of the autoimmune disease psoriasis. And we did a screen, and we had an AI engine that kind of helped us interpret the screen. And we did like 4 years worth of work in 6 months. And we now have targets in hand. That blows my mind, right? And if we can find a way to scale that and do that over and over and over again, we are just going to have this wealth of discovery, right? We're not going to be searching for targets anymore. We just have to then figure out how to drug them all and to get there. So that I am absolutely positive is going to be delivered, right? It's just then what comes after this. And we have a debate internally. And for those of you who don't know us at Biohub, we used to be called the Chan Zuckerberg Biohub Chicago. We're funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So that's Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla Chan. And so we debate a lot internally, including with Mark and Priscilla, about AI and how it is going to impact medicine. And we all believe in it, but we all kind of acknowledge that, like, the algorithms are not going to jump out of, the computers and cure people, right? There are still a lot of things that have to happen in labs for us to realize the impact of all that discovery. So that's the gap for me, but I still believe there's something very significant to be delivered.
Right. Wonderful.
I mean, I think on the practical application, what we look for from my team is, first of all, what are we solving for? And I will tell you, in order for us to do anything in innovation, you have to have time. And providers today do not have time. And so what I've really seen as being exciting is a lot of these technologies, tools, the ambient documentations, all those different things that are out there that are actually giving us time back. Because when you have time, then you get to have the conversations about doing a clinical trial. And actually, it's interesting, since we launched with our ambient solution, we've seen providers having like 120% better experiences with their patients from an eye contact standpoint. So they actually feel like they're communicating. We have providers who are reducing their PJ time. So that is the time after work that they were actually doing all these closing of notes and things. And the more that we see technology like AI getting closer and closer to that patient interaction, the less downstream work that these providers have. And that's where I do believe, like, when you solve for time, you're solving for brain width. And now you actually have the ability to think and push healthcare forward. I look at how many clinicians probably went into medicine because they did like research. They liked to push the envelope. And after 6 months in working in a health system, pretty soon that dream's gone. And it's because they're stuck with the mundane, the administrative burden, the cognitive burden that we put on them. So I'm really excited to see how these technologies are giving back that time.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Ken, did you want to jump in on that? Or?
Yeah, so, I mean, AI is like, you remember when everything with the internet was hot, and then before that, nano and all these other prefixes, right? So at the end of the day, make sure it's grounded. It's a technology. But from our lens of making sure that it's available to everybody, it's kind of hard, because you have to be intentional about it, and that oftentimes is misaligned with the way the market is. And so the three things, for example, that if you are aiming for, and I'll give an example in a second, where an AI-enabled technology can be used everywhere, is you have to plan for reach. So you've got to plan for, yes, you've got to reach all the populations that is not currently addressed by the existing healthcare infrastructure. You have to have trust. Ideally, you've worked with the populations you want to help and include. And then, sustainability, which is, these groups, they're not resource rich, right? So the cost structure has to make sense. And how many people know of this thing called the Rural Health Transformation Program? Okay, so I was out in Anchorage, which, my bad, I didn't know it was that far. That's totally my bad. So we're talking with Anchorage, and we're talking with Alaska, and they received $272 million for 740,000 people. The RHTP program, everybody, is $50 billion distributed to states, ideally pro rata, and the idea is use that money to develop new ways of delivering care to your rural populations. So this is the first time that they're thinking about funding really cool stuff, like AI-enabled. They've got, a number of groups have this handheld ultrasound. Awesome. But oftentimes you need a specialist to do that. So here's what the AI does. You give it to someone like myself who could barely use my iPhone, and it has an AI layer which gamifies the position, and then it beeps when it's in the right position, and then it takes the ultrasound, and then it shoots it up to the cloud, and then an algo basically provides a call that, of course, a physician has to validate. But all of that does not exist without the AI layer. So again, it's one of those things where AI is a great tool, and it will definitely accelerate, and there's so many good things that it can do, but if it's not built in for everybody at the beginning, it's challenging to get there.
Great. That kind of dovetails into another question I had. Shay, I'm going to ask you, research organizations like Biohub, you're starting at the beginning of developing AI. What kind of design and data choices need to be made so that those biases and in that democratization of use is there from the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we think quite a bit about this. I mean, biology is kind of lagging behind other sectors in which AI is being used because the data is very sparse. You know, you can't just kind of crawl the internet and find all the data and start crunching it and create powerful LLMs the same way that you can in other fields. So quantity of data is really important, but so is the quality of the data. Also the diversity. I mean, here we're more focused on cells, less focused on people, just kind of early in the pipeline. So we think a lot about, you know, context and different types of cells and different environments and how can we incorporate all of the different things that cells can do. Because ultimately what we want to build is an actual virtual cell. So a recapitulation of everything that a human cell can do, but in silico. And many of you probably know this, cells are really complicated. They do a lot of things. And trying to describe biology with AI is not like using natural language, right? Words just come one after the other, and they really only come in a certain number of combinations. Biology is so multidimensional, nonlinear, it's in all of these different directions, it has many, many different layers. And so finding ways to have data that represents all of those layers is really challenging. I mean, there is uncertainty about whether we're actually going to get there to be able to do this because it is so complicated. So we, in addition to doing fundamental research, doing biomedical research, we also are very much in the business of large-scale data generation. We have an effort called the Billion Cell Project. That is exactly what it sounds like. We're trying to get 1 billion cells worth of data. That's actually not even enough. We're going to need to go beyond that. And so we are using, you know, every technology that we can kind of get off the shelf. We're creating new technologies that are really high throughput data engines. And that is going to be absolutely key to kind of going from where we are right now, which is a very nascent point, to really being able to deploy AI at scale in biology.
Great. I'm going to ask, I'll start out with Justin, actually. Kind of move in a different direction. What kind of things need to change in regulation, reimbursement, organizational decision-making to really get these moonshots to the moon as opposed to either incremental or just dying on the vine?
I think that's one of the things that most people don't realize and appreciate about healthcare is that we can't just make a decision and buy something and immediately recognize the benefit of it. So you have your regulatory side, you have actually regulatory coming at multiple angles. You have the Joint Commission, you have the government and how they want to approach tort reform and all these different things. But I do think that if you really boil it down, the basics, the fundamentals that we have to get at are really back to that first principles concept of like, what is the problem that we're solving? Like, why is it that we can't deliver something in healthcare? Well, people will blame the payer because we're not reimbursed for it. But then you have to actually start asking the incentive behind why healthcare is delivered in the first place, and we can go down a rabbit hole in this one. But we're incentivized in a very different model than most other most other groups. Like fee for service, in that model today, it's all about consumption. And it's not about trying to really shift the focus and shift the risk. And so as I think about one of the biggest opportunities for health systems, it's really how do we move away from being like providers managing risk and we become risk managers providing care. Because then I think some of those regulatory issues that you typically run into, the commercials, or I'm sorry, the reimbursement side, you start to move those out and you have to become your own kind of, I guess, operator, orchestrator of how you deliver care. And then you get to get some of those barriers out of the way. But yeah, healthcare is not an easy space to work in, and I think a lot of startups, honestly, think that you're going to be able to go from 0 to 100, and I can't tell you how many startups have said, we're going to change that dynamic, and we're going to get it done in like 60 days, and 16 months later, they still don't even have a BAA signed. And so I think, we do it to ourselves a little bit, but back to your point, it's because we're dealing with patient lives, right? And so we have to be very, very careful about that. But I do think, back to my comment, if we can shift the role that the health system plays in managing risk, we will be able to move things much further faster.
That's great. Ken, it looks like you got something.
Just to give you guys a compliment, so whether it's Endeavor or Northwestern or University of Chicago or Rush, we're really lucky in this area because you guys really have a change management organization, something that's receptive to startups. Let me boil down, if there are startup founders in the audience and they haven't gone down this road, here's what you're asking when you walk in the door. Hi, I have something. We would like to take some of your time, some of your precious clinicians' time and energy, some of your resources, perhaps some of your money, and we're going to benefit, basically.
And there's no guarantee.
And there's no guarantee,
it's
yeah,
gonna work.
yeah. And so I don't mean this as a bad thing, but for the startups out there, just understand what you're asking them to do. And in terms of expediting towards medical moonshots, like more of this change management office or capacity in more of these healthcare systems, that's probably a good thing, but it is rare, and we're very lucky to have it in our ecosystem, number one. Number two is kind of real-world evidence. So we're really good at, if I have a startup and it's an AI and I've trained it on my patient population and the data, I'm really good at doing those preclinical studies, the pre-launch studies, because I know exactly what they need to look like and what I need to achieve for regulatory and maybe even some reimbursement submissions. But if you want to get to real scale, it has to work in the real world. And so, first of all, any good idea I have is somebody else's. Someone much smarter than me is toying with the idea of requiring, he refers to it as real-world evidence infrastructure. And it's built in from day one. So you can get past, that initial point, yes, that initial trial, but that point right after, which ideally will get you to the J-curve faster of widespread use. Well,
so just to carry that one forward, I think this is kind of the dichotomy that exists in healthcare. We all want everything to be hyper-personalized. We want it to feel like I have the unique point solution that's going to help me with my problem. But that goes in contrast to being able to have that platform that has the stability. And so, I think a lot of times the startups, they have to fight the incumbents, and the incumbents are real. But I also think, we're constantly trying to figure out how do you get to that safe platform, and that's a big challenge. I agree with you.
Great. I'd ask kind of how Biohub fits into that, getting into the clinical, the clinical environment, and really bringing things to either commercialization or to Justin to start using day after day, or whatnot.
We are really focused on early stage and like that discovery phase of things that I described. But we will get there. And, we do basic science, but with an eye towards translation. And we don't do science where we can't see the arc of translation. So, we were, again, it's early days, but there are things that are starting to come out of our programs that I think will be, good substance for startups and good substance for partnerships. And, because we're a pretty nimble, small organization, we can move faster than your typical university, which I think could be a superpower when we get there. So yeah, it's certainly part of the model. But the way that the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative looks at kind of discovery and investing in science is they take a very long-term view on where they should invest, and they're very comfortable with like a 10-year time horizon, a 20-year time horizon, and that's what allows us to kind of take on the big challenges that are more the moonshots rather than the incremental. So we're very fortunate that we don't, like, there's not a lot of bean counting, like how many papers have you published, how many patents, how many startups, that kind of thing. And all those things are important, but if you can take the time at the front end to really build a very strong foundation and a strong pipeline, you're much better equipped to then make the impact.
Great. I'm going to kind of shift over, but I think that you could start out this conversation in the kind of long term. What are the kind of guardrails and other things that are essential to ensure safety as you're developing the moonshot over time, or you're looking for equity, or you're looking to get it into the hospital room?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the guardrails, and we do think a lot about this in the context of developing new AI models. Any model that we create goes through a very thorough safety audit. We're mainly scrutinizing kind of bioterrorism, these kinds of things, and the potential for misuse. And so it's something that we have to take a close look at. But at the same time, I don't want the guardrails to be like, those barriers that you see on the side of highways sometimes, to keep the noise out. Like that, I think would be very detrimental. So I think we'll see. I mean, one thing that I think is really important for AI as it goes forward is just some way of assessing confidence, right? Like one of the biggest problems with the LLMs right now is that they will not tell you that they just made up the answer they gave you, right? And if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't know that it was the wrong answer. And it really doesn't make a lot of sense that we're proceeding that way, and it is a lack of regulation. But I think in science, I mean, we're so tethered, right, to facts and what is known and what is not known, and you really can't make stuff up in science. Like, that is strongly frowned upon to do that. Yeah. So I think we have to be, maybe we're the ones that can be that much more rigorous and maybe have the guardrails and use things like, we're very comfortable with like our error bars and our confidence intervals, and there's no reason that AI shouldn't employ those same things in terms of quantifying outputs.
In terms of guardrails for equity, if I can give the example of, a lot of AI algorithms are developed here at our academic medical centers, at our medical centers, and the algos are informed by the patient populations that they have access to. We're all super lucky, right? We have access to it. We're blessed. We have. You're looking at a specific socioeconomic group, a specific geographic group, a specific, you fill in the blank. And one of the things that a few companies I've seen have instituted is sort of like an equity audit on their data, which basically means make sure you have actually a broad range of people, of races, of ethnicities, of geographies, of socioeconomics, of environmental exposures. And that not only applies to the creation of the algo, but also pre-deployment testing. Like if you want this to be truly, it's basically the same sides, different sides of the same coin, but take that algorithm and make sure, if you're intending it truly to be for everyone, that it actually works before you launch it.
Works on everyone, right? Any thoughts on?
I mean, so as a health system, we are constantly looking at tools left and right. And so we've had to stand up a structure actually to intake. And to the points raised here, it has to look at a variety of factors, but first, do no harm. Like, let's start there. But then it really very quickly, we have to get it to the subject matter experts. And I think that's one of the things that we've actually learned at Endeavor is everybody talked about centralized oversight. And the reality is you can't do that anymore. There's too many algorithms, there's too many things. You have to push it to the people that actually have the ability to understand when it's hallucinating. I think that's been one of our key learnings because we tried to control it, and very quickly we realized you can't do that. One of the challenges that I honestly face when we bring a solution forward is we tell clinicians, hey, we really want you to use this really cool thing, but by the way, it's still your name that's signed to that note. And if you're telling them I'm giving you this tool, they want to have confidence that it isn't going to hallucinate. And I think that's really where we are right now. I mean, I think that AI will continue to mature and we'll get better at these things, but at the end of the day, it's still the provider's license on the line. And so I think there's always going to be a healthy skepticism associated with that. Now, when we move into a world where AI is the doctor and call it for what it is, there's a time and a place where that will be. I think that's when it's really going to change the way that we think about how we manage risk.
It strikes me that the doctors, not only is this their name that they're signing off on what the AI does, but you're asking them to troubleshoot whether the AI was right or not.
It is true. Like some of our models that we actually have, it has the thumbs up, thumbs down. And it does improve it, but it's like you're telling them, like, I need you to take care of the patient with the information we just provided to you. Do you think it was good? Was it good enough? Really? Or not?
Right, right. At the risk of pushing through all this caution, I'm going to ask.
Always a good intro.
Exactly. So how do we get this going really fast? No. Nevertheless, what do we see in the next, not the next 10 years, but the next few years that we think will really either be a moonshot or be significant in the clinical world? What's going to come?
I mean, I think that you have to look, and it's so funny that you have to say this, but like, I want a solution that's solving a problem. And I think so often we get people saying, hey, we can give you this new model, and it can do this, and it can tell you about this. Well, is it actually going to allow me to care for that patient any differently? I can't tell you how many new risk prediction models are out there. We can tell you that your patient has a risk of developing this. Well, guess what? Payers don't pay you to try to guess if someone's going to develop disease in 15 years. And so I think it really goes back to understanding what are the key problems that we have. Areas that I think are ripe for this, imaging. If you think about radiology, you think about digital pathology, you think about all those modalities right now where it's extremely time-consuming, extremely human-driven, but computers have the ability to really overlay and actually provide recommendations immediately. I go back to the idea of what's going to allow this to scale. It's going to be clinician adoption. And if clinicians don't see this as benefiting their practice, they won't adopt it. And so our job really has been, how do we try to bring those solutions forward that are going to, number one, make their lives easier, but then we can actually afford to scale it. But I do think if you can really focus on this being a problem that you're solving, as opposed to look at what I can create, and you figure out health system how you're going to use it, you'll have a better chance of adoption if you do the former.
Ken, I'd like to hear how you get problems needing solving, especially with an equity lens.
Yeah, so we have a 10-year-old daughter, Maddie, and she finds Daddy really annoying because I'm really optimistic. So I preface what I'm about to say. Yes, a lot of money is leaving healthcare and science. It really is. It truly is a challenging time. But there are pockets of possibility, and just going back to that rural health thing, like none of these, all these new technologies that can be decentralized, that can be used in whether it's Anchorage or the small town that I grew up in that had one streetlight and one clothing store for men, women, and dogs. You know what I mean? That kind of place. And industry and venture, and I'm guilty of this myself, like we didn't have money to say, hey, go start up, you go ahead and use this money to validate this application. There's risk capital for that right now from CMS and RHTP. And you know, you mentioned the change from fee-for-service effectively to value-based. Like there are some, I hate that phrase, green shoots, right? The Access program or Elevate and these others. So again, yes, I am overly optimistic, but you have that capital bridge now to at least try some of these things.
Yeah, I was going to add that kind of short-term inflection point to me could also relate to access to information, right? Like information when it comes to managing health is so powerful, right? That's the key that really unlocks most things. And, you know, with AI and with the tools, and not everybody has access to them or has the confidence to use them, but an awful lot of people do. And we now have at our fingertips not perfect information, but a lot of information. Yep. And that, I do think that is going to make a meaningful impact on how we manage health. Like if you think about the continuous glucose monitor, right? That is a device that gives people information about their glucose levels minute to minute, hour to hour. And that is already impacting outcomes for diabetics. It's the information. I have celiac disease. I was diagnosed decades ago, but only after lying in a hospital for about a week, and no one was able to figure out what was wrong with me. It was like, well, maybe you have a Giardia infection. Oh, maybe you have a endocrine tumor. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, great, thank you. And nobody could really, they're like, but we really don't know, but you seem really sick. I'm like, yeah, I am really sick. So finally, this was when Google was kind of like first a tool that you could really use. I just thought, darn it, I'm just going to sit here in this hospital bed. I'm going to figure this out myself. And I did. And once I figured it out, I like rang the little bell next to the bed, and the doctor came in. I said, I know what's wrong with me. He said, what's wrong with you? I said, I have celiac disease. He's like, I bet you're right. You know, I was like, and this was in Boston. This was not out in the middle of nowhere. But so anyway, but information in that example, I mean, I don't think this doctor was the greatest anyway, but for all the idiosyncratic stuff that goes on with us, right? Somebody else has experienced that, and if the LLM has ingested that information, you have a chance of finding that, and you don't need the doctor that has seen it before. And I really do think that there is very short-term value and like really a paradigm shift in that. So that's something that I'm very optimistic about and hopeful about.
That makes me think, this is off the script, but that makes me think that the largeness of the large language models and the looking to go to scale and get things in, commercialize things, actually does give green shoots to equity, because all this stuff. Well, you tell me.
No, I mean, look, I think it does. It just, you know, I'll use the example of Juneau, Alaska. First of all, again, going back to my geographically challenged mind, I didn't know that part of the year you can't actually drive between Alaska and Juneau. And a lot of places don't have broadband, a lot of places don't have cellular. So overall, yeah, 100% agree. It's a game changer for a huge additional swath. But there are groups that are still left. But I understand that's more the northern than not.
Perfect. Let me ask, what should healthcare leaders and everybody in this room, what should they be prioritizing? What should they be looking at? What should they be not looking at within like the next 12 to 24 months? That especially on machine-driven, if it's not moonshots, incremental stuff that's going to become a moonshot.
So my take on it is if I think about 12 to 18, 24 months, we're seeing how quickly this revolution is unfolding, and the question is, when do you jump in? And it's something that our team fights with all the time. Like, we know that there will be incumbents that ultimately develop these tools, and I'm going to use ambient dictation just because that's top of mind right now. But we know that Epic is going to be launching their own version of an ambient tool. They've made it, it's piloted, all those things. And there has been billions of dollars of value created in other companies who have created these tools. And what they're going to be worth tomorrow, we'll have to find out. But I think the question is, for health system and health leaders, are you comfortable dating as opposed to getting married? And I think that's really a challenge for hospitals and health systems. We have been traditionally looking at the long term, how do we bring this system in, and we, it takes so long to do something to bring it through to the point of like regulation, security, data security, all those things, that you're really signing up to get married before you really know what it's going to look like in 5 years. And I think as a health system, we are becoming much more comfortable with dating. And I think that's important for startups to recognize as well. There is the elephant in the room. Epic is going to be playing in a lot of this space. And as a system, we want to sweat our assets. And so thinking about Epic being one of those tools, we're going to sweat it. But if you're a startup that's not a one-trick pony, but you're actually saying, you know what, to a health system, we're always going to be 2 to 3 years ahead of Epic. And then when Epic actually has that tool available, we're going to have the next 2 to 3 years for you. Those are the things that we're really looking forward to. Because again, the pace of change and the ability for someone to stand up their own copycat of whatever the new technology, that barrier to entry has diminished greatly. And so for me, it's really trying to figure out how do you future-proof, but back to the point, we're not getting married now, we're going to be doing a lot more dating.
Ken, I want to jump in and ask you to put the startup hat on even more than equity right now and talk to what Justin said.
Yeah, I'm super excited over the next 12 to 24 months. And the statement I would say to the startups out there is, equity is a market. And let me give an exact example. So the, Alzheimer's, terrible disease. And for people in this audience, for example, those with means, those with access, those with good insurance, the time usually on average, this is the Alzheimer's Foundation numbers, between when you think something's off and when you actually get diagnosed and put on treatment, on average is 5 to 7 years. So with AI, if you design the ecosystem, and that's what we did with a company, and what it does is it takes AI plus fully validated, clinically accepted blood-based biomarkers and puts it all in like an Amazon-like experience. And the end result is, instead of 5 to 7 years, it's now 5 to 7 months. And oh yeah, more than 50% of the people that now use it are the people that are not like us. I mean that in the best of ways, right? Coolest thing ever. But my whole point is, again, for all the startups out there, health equity is a market. You just have to figure out how to get it, but I swear to you, it's a market.
Wonderful. That what Ken says kind of really dovetails into what you were saying about the knowledge and the information that AI can build. What do you think about in the next 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, I think about this a lot, just how fast the world is changing right now. Like, I can't think of another time in my life where it just felt like I'm doing something different every 6 months, both in the way that I get things done myself with my life, but also in my work. And I think, we're going to have to all become so much more adaptable to change. It's something about humans, right? We don't really like change. We really don't. But this is a time where we all have to be able to kind of pivot and adapt and watch what's happening, embrace new tools, try them out, figure out which ones work, which ones are safe, which ones are powerful, which ones maybe we put to the side. And I think, the world is going to be kind of reshaped in the next few years, and will emerge with the people that are most agile, kind of weathering whatever happens between now and then the best.
Fantastic. I think we're close to done. So thank you guys very much. This was really, really interesting, and I hope everybody else appreciates it.